We've set ourselves the very ambitious task of giving you a 10-minute snapshot each of our projects, our strategy for building collective efficacy in our schools. So we will attempt to stick to time and to try to give you an insight into what we did in our schools and then also what we learnt from that. So the learnings that maybe we wish we had before we started, things that we might do differently, and things that might help you if you were looking to embark on a collective efficacy journey in your schools. So, as Michelle noted before, my name's Kate Dullard and I'm the principal at Penleigh and Essendon Grammar School. We are a school of about 3,000 students in the northwest, K-12 and co-ed. And when we were embarking on the CE journey, I was really keen to build the capacity of our middle and emerging leaders. So that idea of kind of leading from the centre. And we built a leadership program with the help of some consultants who are in the room. Hello, Maddie. Hello, Brendan. And we aim to challenge emerging leaders to increase their skills and capability alongside other similarly aspirational colleagues. And we really focused on mindset and then evidence of impact. We kind of saw through the pandemic that so many people who didn't have formal leadership roles were leading because their skills were in demand at that time. And we wanted to capitalise on that and kind of give people permission to lead. So the participants were challenged to kind of develop their understanding in the areas that are in the table up there. And then that ultimately led to action research within the school, and them leading and influencing colleagues with the broader aim of embedding evaluative practice in the school. So we had an expression of interest program. So I went around to staff meetings and explained what we were trying to do, talked about collective efficacy, why it was important. And we had an expression of interest process. We had loads of people interested. We capped it at about 40. We were initially thinking it would just be teaching staff, but we had chaplains and camp staff and psychologists involved, and we said yes to them too. Anyone who was interested in interventions that were going to improve student outcomes was on board. So the projects they could work on were very broad. It was very open. It had to be related to improve student outcomes and something that was of interest and within their sphere of influence, I guess, too. So we had, as I said, 41 in the first year, and 23 of those have actually continued on to a second year, and we've had another intake this year with 28. So we're talking 70 teachers almost across the school who've now been part of this program. The key learnings for me, and Kerry used the triangle, the mindset, tool set, skill sets, and the first one really is about mindset. So giving people permission to lead, supporting them to lead regardless of their role, and also, as Kerry noted, the research into CE makes clear the importance of mindset. So teachers really have to believe that the efforts of the team as a whole can make a difference to educational outcomes. So we had to spend a lot of time on that learning about collective efficacy and examples of why it's helpful and important. So how did those perceptions change? So in terms of the impact of the program, we've got before and after, so pre and post data, and there we've asked loads of questions. I've only included 3 because of our very tight time limits, but you can see there their confidence in leading initiatives. So many of them don't have formal leadership roles. There was significant growth there in terms of how confident they feel to lead in the school. In terms of the attitudes that they're taking into staff meetings and into the staff room and into their professional conversations, that belief that's been conveyed that we can have a shared impact on outcomes, again, we've had growth there. And then in terms of linking practice to evidence, so understanding why we do things a certain way, again, we saw growth. We've still got some neutral there, and I think that's where we do need to continue to do some work, and perhaps that's also to do with some of the people in the program not having direct influence over staff performance goals because they're not in formal leadership roles. A second key learning for me was around, again, Kerry spoke about mindset, skill set, tool set, was around skill set. So we had staff who had selected interventions or designed interventions, but they couldn't articulate what the impact was going to be, or they hoped the impact was going to be. So for me, it was like, these are, we're looking at why that's the case. These are keen, aspirational, hardworking people. They're really interested in being part of the program, but they didn't have an understanding of evaluative practice. And so really not taking for granted the fact that, that all educators will understand how to design an intervention and how to measure its impact, to really spend time working on building their understanding of evaluative practice. So keep bringing it back to, how you're going to measure the impact of that. How will you know? How will you know that it's been successful? And trying to lock those outcomes in. And I think too, the role of the coach there was important. We had, each of them was assigned to a manager, who was going to act as their coach for the projects. And some of them were more hands-on than others, and I think that had an impact too on the success of the project. So we've also then, in the next year, invested some time and energy into coaching the coaches. So that's been really important as well. Just to give you a bit of a snapshot of one of the projects. So again, remember, we've got 70 people in the program. It sounds like a cult, doesn't it? 70 people in the program, and this is one example. So Natasha in our junior school, you worked on, she's mainly at prep, and she worked on writing handbooks. And at the junior school, they developed writing handbooks across the whole junior school. So one teacher has, changed the way writing's approached in the junior school. So each handbook, and there's one per year level, includes ACARA writing achievement standards, internal proficiency scales that align with our reporting, annotated ACARA work samples, de-identified and annotated writing samples of our students' work as well. And the handbooks align from prep through to year 6 so that an outstanding year 3 sample aligns with a proficient year 4 sample. When they were developing these writing handbooks, I think they then found it difficult with using different prompts. So the cat in the hat on the mat prompt was a visual prompt that then was used as a writing task for students at prep to 6. So they've all used the one prompt. And they're looking at, the way that writing develops across the school. What they're then doing, that they worked in year level teams to build these. They worked at cross age to ensure there was alignment across the school. Time was allocated to that in staff meetings and in year level team meetings to get that off the ground. They've developed it into an electronic resource, and the next step will be for year level teams to expand on the genres that are in the writing handbooks as well. And then their next iteration is to develop a student version of these. And the aim of that is that students can actually use this, look at their own work, look at the handbook, see where they've come from and where they're headed. And so all of that obviously aligns with the research into formative assessment, into feedback, and into collective efficacy in terms of the teachers really believing that this is something that can make a difference to student writing. And we've also then got, of course, the student outcomes in terms of their writing progress as evidence of the impact of that intervention. So that was one example of the projects, and some of them were less successful than that. I'm not going to be, I'll be honest about that. But when you think about the capacity for this to have an impact, one teacher working with the whole of the junior school and really shaping the way that writing is approached. So it was pretty impressive, and I think the other way we've collected evidence on the impact of that too is through interviews with new staff, so people who haven't used it before, and who what their experience of teaching writing has been, and then what it has been using the handbooks. And so she's conducted interviews with the new staff because we always thought about it in terms of the student experience of using the handbooks and their outcomes, but we hadn't thought about measuring the impact of teachers. So we probably would have liked to have collected some pre-data in terms of the teachers as well as that. So again, one project of the 70 people involved. The third learning for me is around consistency and sustainability. So this is kind of, I guess, the tool set, the structures and supports that we put in place. In terms of the CE tracking tool, I've seen growth. So we were kind of looking at the indirect impact of this program on people who are not involved in it. So what do those teachers, how has it changed their experience of teaching at the school when they're not involved in it, but they might have been part of the writing moderation project, or might have been part of the RAP that was about, increasing engagement And so we use the CE tracking tool across the school. And I don't expect you to read this because it's tiny. And also we've used the 2021 version of the tool, so it looks a little different from what's on the table. But you can see there, the heads of school were asked to sort of annotate the tool, and they've got in blue snapshots of evidence that I've then followed up on in conversations to say this is where they think the teachers are at. So started in phase 3 in 2021 and then have moved to 3 and 4 in 2023. But then another section of the school placed his staff in phase 1 and moved to phase 2. And then they've shown growth, so they're in phase 2 now, and they're moving, they're largely phases 2 and 3 now. But it's about trying to achieve consistency across the school, so you don't have these pockets of greatness. I think when you look at the tool, you can imagine one staff member in your head and you think, yes, we're phase 4, and then you think of another faculty or team and you think, oh, no, we're actually phase 1. So we don't have any of those, no. But, you know, trying to achieve consistency is really important because you need to be able to think of the whole school and collective efficacy across the school in terms of your teaching teams. And the other one is we used this intervention to move us from one point to another. And so for us, the challenge is to think about what's next and how do we continue to grow CE in the school, so the structures and supports we can put in place. And then resources, I won't lie, it wasn't cheap. We had, 40 people out for 4 full days across the year, and then they've had time in staff meetings. And if you think about that time, we used Menzies funding. The support of the Menzies Foundation was absolutely fantastic. But how do we scale it up and out? So how do schools that are less well-resourced put things like this in place, and what opportunities do we have as a school to bring others into the fold and say, you from your school bring a team into our program for next year and you bring a team in for next year and maybe share costs that way. That's something that we've thought about too. But it is, those structures and supports are really important. When it is work that's having a really significant impact on CE in our school anyway, I think, and has the capacity to do so in others.